Dyslexia is a condition which affects many adults and children. It's said that as many as 7% of the population is dyslexic. So, what is dyslexia? It's not a simple question, nor is the answer uncomplicated. The International Dyslexia Association would say dyslexia is an inherited condition that makes it extremely difficult to read, write and spell in your native language, despite at least average intelligence. However, the man we're going to meet next, Ron Davis, author of The Gift of Dyslexia, might have a very different definition, and Ron joins us now. Good morning, Ron.
Good morning, Pat.
Now, first of all, tell us about yourself and how dyslexia affected your life.
Well, I am dyslexic, but I'm also a bit autistic, and essentially my learning was almost zero. So I got the label uneducatable mental retardation as a child.
So you got through childhood being regarded by everybody around you as slow.
Yes.
So when did you get a diagnosis of dyslexia?
Well, actually, I got an IQ test first. And I scored very high on an IQ test, and the decision was made that I would get speech therapy, and my speech problems would be resolved, and then they were going to teach me how to read. And the reading training amounted to crawling on the floor for a half an hour twice a day, balancing on a teeter board, and balancing on a balance beam every day, and doing phonics training every day. And the crawling and the balancing worked very well, but I couldn't do the phonics. And it was very much like torturing me. And the reason for that is I don't think with sounds. I think with images. And if you can't think with sound, trying to do the phonics training is almost impossible. I would say it is impossible.
Now, the phonics training is breaking down words into little bits.
Yes. And you would have to hear it inside your mind before you could do it with your mouth. Now, I can say the sounds. I know what those sounds are, so I can speak with the words. But the whole idea of trying to recognize any word by breaking it down and sounding it out, I tried and tried and tried that most of my life. That's the way I tried to read.
And it just didn't work for you. Now, how did you get on in life? I mean, did you become successful in your endeavors?
Well, I was very lucky to have a memory that I couldn't forget anything. And two, a good intellect. So as a result of that, my job was to hide the fact that I couldn't read. So every chance I got to figure out a different way that I could hide I couldn't read, I would take advantage of that.
So did you become a successful businessman?
Yes, I was a successful businessman. Before that, I was a successful engineer. And then after that, I was a successful artist.
So how did you manage to do all of that without being able to read or write?
Well, you just learn how. You just cope. You find ways of getting through. And also, I would get people that would do the reading for me without realizing that's what they were there for. And also very fortunate to marry the right girls at the right time.
Plural. You married more than one.
Oh, no, not at the same time. If they got close to figuring out that I couldn't read or write, then I would have to find a different one. But
my goodness. How did you do this? I mean, was it something like, I'm sorry to a secretary, I've forgotten my glasses. Could you read that letter to me?
That would work. Or, it wasn't that I couldn't read at all. But it took so long and it was so hard to do that I just didn't do it. But let's say I was going to have a business lunch at a particular restaurant. I might get the menu from that restaurant 2 or 3 days in advance and simply go through it at the speed I can. And because I can't forget, then I would memorize it. And that way I could pretend to read it and even make comments on it and point at the right words. And no one would know that I hadn't just read it.
So you really had to rehearse all of those kind of things. It makes for a lot of hard work. At what point did you decide, I've got to do something about this, I've got to try and fix myself?
Well, most of my life I believed that I had brain damage that would prevent me from learning how to read or write. That didn't stop me from trying, so I was always trying to do it. And what the average person could read in maybe 5 minutes, I could get through it in an hour to an hour and a half. But I was never really sure that I got it right. And I don't know where I was going right there.
Yeah. Well, it's just you were trying all different ways of sorting out your problem. How did you eventually fix yourself?
I believe that I had brain damage, and I was working as an artist. I changed to the point where I'm working as an artist, and I began to notice that when I was at my artistic best, I was at my dyslexic worst. And what that says to that part of me that's an engineer is this cannot possibly be true. Because if you have brain damage, if the problem is a physical problem, you cannot change it. It has to remain the same all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like the idea is, I can't have brain damage in the afternoon, and in the morning it goes away for a little while, and in the afternoons it comes back. It doesn't work like that. So with that realization, I'm now thinking, the problem is not a structural problem, then what is it? Well, the next answer is, if it's not a structural problem, it's a functional problem. And if it's a functional problem, that means I'm either doing something that causes it, or I'm failing to do something, and that's what's causing it. And when I started looking for those things, is when I became a researcher into the field of dyslexia. And what I discovered was I was actually doing something that caused the problem to be there. And when I could figure out a way to prevent what I was doing from happening, then I could read.
So you were effectively switching off the thing
Right.
that was making you dyslexic. What was that thing in your case?
Okay, well, it has to do with what we call disorientation in America. I know that in the rest of the world it has an extra syllable, that word, but I don't know where to put it in. I think you use the word disorientated, where we would use the word disoriented. So anyway, have you ever had the experience of sitting in a vehicle that's stationary and something outside your vehicle moves and you feel like you're the one that's in motion?
Sure, particularly it happens when you're in a parked aircraft at the airport and something moves and you don't know whether it's you
or the other, or something
or
else.
a train in the station and you don't know which of you is moving, the train next to you or you.
Exactly. The part of your brain that you use to cause that phenomenon, a dyslexic uses to make the symptoms of dyslexia. And by the way, when that happens to you, you're as dyslexic as I am, because you're the same equipment that distorts your perception in that instance is what distorts our perception when we're trying to read words on a page.
So how did you switch it off?
Well, essentially, the disorientation, there's a part of your brain that's what its job is to do that. And we discovered a way to influence that part of our brain so it doesn't do it. And we call it orientation. And we use our imagination and a way to position what we call our mind's eye in a place that it actually turns it off. And it's literally, if you're a disorienter, if you're dyslexic, you already know how to do it. So what you don't have is the understanding of it. So we will just give the individual a little step that they can do that will allow them to now understand what it is that was going on, so and they can turn it off.
This is called the Davis correction method after you. Yeah. What does orthodox science think of your method?
They don't know what dyslexia is. They still think that there's something wrong with a person's brain that prevents them from being able to hear sounds correctly. And this comes from what's going on in the academic community and the accepted treatments for dyslexia. This, by the way, is in the process of changing. There are a lot of other people that are saying, okay, the traditional systems for dealing with dyslexia, they're not effective. There are some systems that are very effective that are not traditional. We should look at those. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're coming in.
Trying to do this for someone who has dyslexia, how long does it take? I mean, I know there's a counselling procedure first and then these techniques. How long does it take to work?
On average, what we're doing is we can teach a dyslexic child, how to control the disorientation, usually in less than an hour. And in about a week, they can be an expert at turning it on and turning it off at will, anytime they choose.
And is there an immediate improvement in reading skills?
There usually is, and sometimes it's immediate, like 3 or 4 grade levels, but it depends on what the age level of the individual is. But see, the disorientation is where the symptoms come from. The real thing that we have to look at is why is it happening in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
And here we get a different perspective. They have known for over 100 years there's more than one way that a human being can think. There's something called verbal conceptualization. Doing that, you're talking to yourself inside your head. It's quiet to the outside, but you're actually thinking with your own voice. The other kind of thinking is called nonverbal conceptualization. And when you're doing it naturally, you're not aware of doing anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is it's subliminal. It's happening too fast. So most people can do both kinds of thinking, and most people do it. But because we're human beings, we have a tendency to specialize in that is either the easiest or the quickest for us to do. And for the dyslexic individual, they have to be primarily a picture thinker to the age of 9. And if we include this now in the overall equation, there is a little thing that I can do with you that will give you a real dramatic perspective on the dyslexia. If you're interested, I would be very happy
Please.
to do that. Well, I get to ask the questions if that's okay. Okay. The first question is, how good is your imagination? If I ask you to imagine an elephant, could you do that?
Oh, very easily, yeah.
Okay, what color is it?
Gray.
All right. Erase the elephant and imagine home.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see where you live now or where you once lived?
No, where my childhood home.
Excellent. Imagine school.
Yeah?
Do you see outside, inside, or both?
Outside.
All right. Imagine a stack of books.
Yeah?
Hardcover, softcover, or mixed?
Mixed.
Okay. Imagine a stack of papers.
Yeah?
Is it messy or neat?
Messy.
Imagine a pencil.
Yeah?
Does it have a rubber on the end?
Yeah.
Okay. Imagine the.
Imagine.
The. Aha. Anything other than the letters THE?
Oh, the.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Imagine ah.
Yeah?
What do you see?
I see this lowercase a.
Excellent. And imagine and.
Yeah?
Okay. What do you see?
The shorthand symbol, the sort of
Right.
figure of 8.
All right. In order for what just happened to be understood, there are two things that we have to consider first. The first thing that we have to consider is that the language mirrors the thought process. If it did not, language would be way too complicated for anyone to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at language, we see that language is composed of symbols. A symbol is composed of 3 parts: what it looks like, what it sounds like, and what it means. The other thing that we have to consider is there's 2 methods of thinking. There's verbal thinking, and then there's picture thinking that is too fast to see. So when I said imagine elephant, in other words, I'm saying, okay, Pat, I want you to shift into your nonverbal thinking mode and think with an elephant.
Mm-hmm.
And there it was, a gray one. Okay. And then doing nonverbal conceptualization, you can accurately think with home and school and books and papers and a pencil. But you cannot accurately think doing nonverbal conceptualization with the, and, or Now, when I said imagine the, you know that feeling that you felt right there, that feeling of what's going on kind of a feeling? Yeah. Okay. From a scientific perspective, that feeling is actually what causes dyslexia. Now, the person has to be dyslexic, but he's not making symptoms. That's what causes the dyslexic person to make the symptoms.
Okay, so you programmed me into thinking in visual images.
Yes.
And then you threw a hand grenade of a word at me.
Actually, well, they were all words, but what I did is I gave you a word that you didn't have a picture for.
Yeah.
And essentially, what comes with it, that feeling that is there, what most people do when they hear that, they will feel that feeling and automatically shift into the to the verbal mode, and they will say to themselves inside their head, did he say that? What did he say? And when you make that shift, that feeling goes away. But if you're 9 years old and you can't do the other kinds of thinking, you can't shift and you can't make that feeling go away. So you get a dose of it, and then a second later you get another dose, and pretty soon you get another one. And eventually that feeling is so intense that it causes the disorientation. And when it causes a disorientation, your brain isn't seeing what your eyes see. Your brain is seeing what you think your eyes should see.
The application of this to other things, hyperactivity, ADD, and as you said yourself, you had a slight autistic problem.
Well, mine was actually very severe to the point I got labeled uneducatable mental retardation. I know I said slight, but I was, taking license, I think.
So it can be applied, the same kind of technique?
Yes. Well, realize well, I have a very simplistic perspective. If you eliminate the reason why the problem exists, the problem will stop existing. So instead of trying to solve the problem, which eventually will need a solution itself, if you can eliminate the reason that it's there, it's now gone and it doesn't need to be solved. So what we do is once the person can control the disorientation, we fill in the blanks. When I said imagine there was a feeling. That feeling came because you had a blank picture for the.
Mm.
What we have to do is we have to fill in the blank. There has to be an image that the dyslexic person can think with for the meaning of that word. And we have the procedures for doing that, and we use plastiline clay. They get to make little models that mean what that word means. Yeah. And when we eliminate the reason why the problem is there in the first place, it's not a problem. Now, the person can still disorient. I worked for years as an artist. I cannot be oriented as an artist. I have to be disoriented in order to create what it is that I want created. But now that I understand orientation and disorientation, I need to be oriented when I sign my work, or it's just going to be scribble.
Okay. By the way, why do you call it the gift of dyslexia?
Well, the very thing that we're doing that causes the problem actually allows us to think very fast. We can think faster than ordinary people, and we will actually be more creative and more intelligent than the average human being. So it really is a gift, but really at the bottom line, our real gift is mastery. We can master things faster than most people can even understand what it's about if we don't leave parts out.
I'm looking at the list of people, famous people with the gift of dyslexia, as you put it. People like Robin Williams, Whoopi Goldberg, Keira Knightley. This is all in the entertainment area. But inventors and scientists, Dr. James Lovelock is dyslexic. Albert Einstein.
My favorite was Albert Einstein, because he also was a bit autistic.
Yeah, Erin Brockovich, we all have seen the movie about her. Indeed, I've met her. Winston Churchill, John F. Kennedy, George Washington.
Yes.
Richard Branson.
Yes.
My goodness, what a catalogue of people. By the way, your technique, are there practitioners in Ireland?
Yes. There were 5, but one has gone somewhere else, so there are currently 4. And actually, the book, The Gift of Dyslexia, was written for mothers. That if a mother of a 9-year-old, the child is struggling in school, what I visualized when I wrote the book was that mother could sit with that book in her lap, read step 1, have the child do step 1, read step 2, and have the child do step 2. And within about a year, the problem should be resolved.
Well, Ron, it's a great pleasure talking to you. I'm sure there are some who take issue with some of your techniques, but results are really what tells all.
Well, I feel like this. If what you do produces a result that you're after, who can really criticize? The only ones that criticize are the ones that are invalidated by the successes that we have. And I don't think that's a proper reason to criticize. So I'm not worried by that. I don't care about it.
All right, Ron, well, thank you very much for joining us. The gift of dyslexia is what mothers and indeed fathers should look out for and help their young ones to lead a fuller and more accomplished life.
Thank you, Pat.